What is going on, everyone? Welcome to today's video. I finally got the replacement scroll wheel in for the Cobra X goggles. So in this video, I am going to be walking you through how to take these apart and get that replaced so you are all good if you have the same issue as me, which it's not working at all. So the first thing you're going to notice when I start taking these foam pads off is the two holes that I have poked in the top part of the visor. Those normally aren't there. You're going to have to use a very small screwdriver to feel around for the hollow spot and puncture it straight through. You're not going to harm anything once you find it. And there's a total of 6 screws holding this front faceplate on that you need to remove in order to take the first piece off. Alright, and once you get those screws out of there, you're going to want to start by removing the receiver module, which you just pop the front cover off, or top cover off, and pull it straight up from the pins. Make sure you take your SD card out as well. And once you got all that out, it should just pull straight out, no problem. So you got 2 ribbon cables that are holding both the power side scroll wheel and the left side menu scroll wheel, which you're going to see me trying to take those off right now. And as you can see, it's probably pretty hard because the housing is in the way. So you actually don't have to do what I'm trying to do here. And you'll see in a second that I realized that and stop doing that. So I'm going to speed it up for this part while you watch me struggle trying to get this clip off the ribbon cable. Alright, now I've finally come to realization that you don't have to pop those clips up yet. So you're going to start next by taking this front faceplate off, and you do that by pressing down on the top and bottom and disconnecting it one at a time. And there it goes, that contains the mirror. Now onto the next part, you have 2 clips on both sides that need to come up. Just be careful not to break them. So I used a very small flathead just to lift them up and separate the top and bottom. There goes the section with the screen and boards attached to it. So at this point you can see that it's a lot easier to reach those ribbon cables and disconnect them when you're ready to do that. Wow, look at how easy that was. So at this point, I'm showing off the screws that need to be removed to pull this scroll wheel switch out. The two smaller ones that are next to each other in the middle, those do not need to come out. That just holds the plastic housing that holds the scroll wheel itself. The only ones you need to pull out are that top one that I just poked and the back one that the ribbon cable is sitting next to. Alright, now I'm going to be pulling this out with a floppy switch on the back because I took those two screws out that my index finger is touching. Wow, look at that. Amazing. There's the two new switches. I bought the left scroll wheel, but apparently it came with both the power side scroll wheel and the left scroll wheel with ribbon cables. So that's pretty cool. $10 from Skyzone's store. I will put a link in the description. So I'm going to start by pulling off the ribbon cables that came with the switch, and I'm just going to use the pre-existing one that's already onto the board, which, spoiler alert, turns out the switch was not bad. Alright, so at this point, before I put everything back together, I wanted to hook up a battery, which be careful when you're doing this because you got a lot of exposed electronics and you're running DC voltage through there. But I wanted to hook up the power and make sure that the scroll wheel was working before I put everything back together, which thankfully I did test it. And it's kind of hard to see. Had a hard time working with the camera angle on this one. But I'm on the channel selection there and nothing is happening. So the switch was not bad. So next step, we are going to be tearing this thing apart even further to check the ribbon cable and replace it with the one that was supplied with the switch. Frustration. Alright, so the next part of disassembling this further to swap out that ribbon cable is a little bit more tedious because you're going to be dealing with the main power ribbon cable and another smaller ribbon cable on the other side. So you just got to mind those and make sure you're very careful and take your time when disassembling this. So for this next piece, you have a total of 4 screws. You can see one. Oh, let me, yeah, there we go, working on this ribbon cable again. Got this one right here and another one apart from it and 2 on the sides. Now on the power side, you have to actually remove the fan from the housing before you can access that screw that I'm poking at right there. So only 2 screws on the bottom of the fan hold it in place, and once you take those out, it just comes right out. Very easy. So I'm actually not going to disconnect the power from the board. I'm just going to move that out of my way so I can access that screw, and then get the other side so I can take it apart. Alright, so now all the screws are out. You should be able to pull this straight apart. No problem. And that's going to expose the main board on top. So that ribbon cable that has the tape over it, that is the one in suspicion. And I noticed that it does have a very, very tight loop where it's taped down to the board. So again, you got another group of screws, pretty self-explanatory. You get those out, and make sure that you got the clips for the ribbon cables also detached. Oh, yep, see? Being a dummy, didn't undo the clips. Gotta make sure I do that. All the clips for the ribbon cables on this that I've encountered so far, they are the flip up kind. So you just get a very small flathead and gently pry it upward. Now, do be careful when you're pulling this main board off. You have the 2 main power leads that are connected to the back. And it's kind of hard to show this with the camera angle, but you'll see some of it. So if you got a nice plastic spudger tool, you can use that to lift those off the board. In my case, I used a guitar pick. You just don't want to use anything metal to prevent possible damage to it. And here we go with the main board. So now I'm going to end up peeling off this tape, which is holding down the ribbon cable for that damaged or non-working scroll wheel. And don't throw it away. Make sure that you set it upright, sticky side up, so we're going to be reusing that. If you do for some reason throw it away, you probably could get away with electrical tape, but I would suggest just saving the piece that originally came with it. So at this point I'm just matching up the ribbon cables to make sure that I tape it down correctly and try to get the loop as original as possible. So when plugging these cables in, just make sure that they are as far in as they can possibly go so they are properly seated. Hold it in place and then press the clip down to lock it. Now this is the point that we're going to be adding the tape. One thing that I did different from how I took this apart was I did not press that ribbon cable flat down over the bend. I left a little bit of slack because it's a really good way to damage ribbon cables. They're very fragile and it's almost impossible to tell. Now at this point, we just put everything back together, reverse of what we did. Now in this part, it's going to be pretty difficult to show you guys on putting these clips back onto the main board. But one thing to keep in mind when doing this is to make sure that the pins are aligned as best as possible. You don't want to chance bending any of these little tiny prongs on the board, because if you do that, it's completely damaged and you probably just ruined it. I've done it to electronics before. They're very fragile. But once you press down and you got them in the right place, you will know, you'll feel a slight click or a snap, and that's when you know it's set in place. And that's all put together. Now time to plug in the side ribbon cables. Again, as always, make sure that they are seated fully before you clamp them down. And on this next part, you're just going to be putting the screws back on that you took off to pull that main board off. Now, once you got everything taken apart, this is also a good time, if you need to clean the screen, the lens, and the mirror before you put it back together, because if you're anything like me, I left a lot of fingerprints when I was working with this stuff and taking it apart. So as far as cleaning the lens, screen, and the mirror, in my case, I was using some Zeiss lens wipes that I use for my goggle lens and my glasses, or you can use a soft microfiber cloth, just as long as it's not gonna. Now you're gonna attach that top plate and get that secure into place. So what I'm actually going to do now is put a couple screws in place just to hold it together, so I got a more stable place to start working with before I attach the fan back on the side. Oh yeah, and another thing I brought up earlier, don't forget about the screw that has to go in first before the fan gets put in, otherwise you can't access it. Oh, look at me getting all confused. I don't know which way is up or down anymore. Oh, there it goes. One of the most important things about putting this thing back together is to make sure that the power cables coming off the fan there are not going to get pinched by the other piece of the housing when you're going to snap it back in place. So just tuck it in like the small channel groove that they have going along the side as best as you can. And now the fun part is reconnecting these ribbon cables for the scroll wheels. So I actually struggled with this for a little while, so that's why I got it sped up. And plus it was hard to get a good camera angle on it to let you see what I was doing. But it was just too painful to watch. When I taped this together, I didn't have that end of the ribbon cable straight enough. So I was sitting here trying to fight that, getting it in, until I finally caved and grabbed some tweezers to hold it in place while I slid it in. Which, don't be afraid to use tweezers on these ribbon cables. Just make sure that you're careful and you're mostly just using them to guide and you're not smashing them. Alright, now same thing, I'm going to plug in the battery and we are going to check one more time to make sure that this works. Wow, look at that. Magic. And if you guys made it this far in the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave the video a like, hit that subscribe button, and it'll help out the channel greatly, and it would make me greatly appreciate all of you. Now the last part of putting this together is just very straightforward. Just reverse assembling what you did. So I am going to speed this up a little bit for you guys. That's what I was talking about with the power cable. In my case, it was actually in my way a little bit, so I had to re-tuck that in. And when you're putting these two pieces together, just make sure that you feel and see that those clips on the side that we popped off earlier snap into place before you put on this faceplate. And we will power it on one last time as I try to stick the camera in my goggles. And we have scrolling motion. But that is how you take these apart and replace the scroll wheels if needed. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.